With me on the stage we have Ari Salvera. If you should like to introduce yourself.
Yes, of course. Okay. Oh wow. Okay, this is working. Hello, everybody. I'm gonna start with the slides. Thank you.
Go for it.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Let's see if this works. Nice. Panel. How about that? Hi. This is so loud. I have to hold it a bit further away. I'm Ari Salvera. I'm here for this panel for this convention about robots that we're doing. I suppose you can laugh. By the way, that's nice. But yeah, welcome to Time as a Fold, a history of Mecha anime. We're gonna have 50 minutes to talk about giant robot anime and how a bit of how it relates to a little show that you might know called Tatakai Choro Boto Seimeitai Transforma, known in our native Argentina as Los Transformers. So, who am I? This is who I am. These are things that I've done. Lifelong robot enjoyer is the most important one, but also comedian 2016 to 2021. This is why I'm standing up and holding a microphone, and this is why you're allowed to laugh with me and at me throughout this entire thing. Because there's going to be jokes, okay? So if you don't laugh, I'll be very sad, and when I get back to Glasgow, I'll think that I'm a failure. So I'm also going to read a bit from my notes at the beginning, and then once we get to the slides, it'll all be fine. We might have time to go for questions at the end, but we probably won't, just letting you know. So you can find me at the bar throughout the weekend, and just ask me about whatever. But yeah, let's keep going. So, why am I doing this panel? Who the heck am I, aside from, well, I am someone that's been watching robot anime since 1987, since before some of my friends were born. And I first watched Mazinger Z, which in case you can't see, I'm wearing a Transformers Mazinger Z crossover t-shirt 2019. Anyway, that got me into robots really at a very young age. I had Transformers, I had Mazinger toys, got into macros via its butchered version Robotech, and then into Transformers, and the rest is whatever this life has become. So, the reason why I'm doing this, I have watched a lot of anime, so you don't have to. And I am the daughter of a classical musician and a history teacher, which means that I'm genetically predisposed to like old things. What else do I got on here? Sorry, I'm wearing contacts, it's kind of... yeah, as I said, I've watched hundreds of hours of Japanese anime with and without robots, and I've also watched hundreds of hours of tokusatsu, whatever that means. It's Kamen Rider and all that kind of stuff that your friends keep telling you about. I'm gonna take sunglasses off. Keep falling on my face. Hello. And I also spent, obviously, 5 years in the Scottish comedy circuit. I'm nobody, would not have heard of me. So, in short, between all those years of experience of Mecha anime and my stand-up pedigree and all of that other stuff, I was born to host this panel. Pronouns are she, her, by the way. Don't get confused by the gruff voice. Now, before we start with the slides, Transformers is inherently linked to the history of Mecha anime or giant robot anime. But I'm going to call it Mecha anime for sure. Perhaps you like the G1 toy of Starscream, that was designed by Shoji Kawamori, who designed the VF1 Valkyrie and does also the Jetfire toy. We're not going to talk about Jetfire too much today. Hate that guy, sorry. And I don't hate Jetfire, I hate Skyfire. That's the guy I hate. Anyway, maybe you like the G1 Soundwave toy and the tapes, right? Well, those were designed by Shinji Aramaki, who designed the motorcycles for Genesis Climber Mospeeda, also known as the third generation of Robotech. He's also designed like almost every transforming motorcycle in anime in the last 40 years. Maybe you like Star Saber? The toy for Star Saber was co-designed by Kunio Okawara, the guy who designed the original Gundam. I got a couple more here. Hidehito Ueda directed Transformers Micron Legend, aka Transformers Armada. He did storyboards for the 2004 remake of Tetsujin 28, which is a remake of the first Mecha anime. So what I'm trying to say is that the history of Transformers and the history of Mecha anime are like the same. They're intrinsically linked. So we only have 50 minutes to get through about 90 years of history before the Hilton staff yeets me to the parking lot face first. So we're going to try to get through as much as we can. So let's get to it. So, we start with the early precursors in the 1930s. There was a giant robot in Golden Bat, a story that was a Kamishibai play. These were plays that were done in the streets. This is obviously like long before like film and TV, and it's like long before like the mass media that we have today. And Kamishibai play was like done with like little paper figures, and was done by street performers. And Golden Bat is probably one of the most famous ones. Golden Bat is an entire other rabbit hole that I recommend you Google because it's fascinating. But there was a giant robot piloted in that. We had Tankudo, which recently got a release in English. This is the English release. And it's a manga by Gato Sakamoto, and it's a giant robot that can do all sorts of weird stuff. It's a very surreal comic. It's very weird. I haven't read it yet. I'm sorry. I'm a poser. But yeah, these are like the earliest precursors. And then, of course, we got these guys. You've probably heard of these guys. Tetsuo and Atom and Gojira. So, Tetsuo and Atom was created by Osamu Tezuka. It's a science fiction manga about a robot boy called Atom, or Astro Boy, as you probably heard his name. Now, these two are kind of the most important precursors for what will become the history of mecha anime, because they kind of get at the core of the themes of what will become kind of like the central core of mecha anime. So, Astro Boy is a hopeful story about an abandoned robot with a nuclear reactor for a heart. And the idea for Atom came to Osamu Tezuka because of his experiences during the war. And it was kind of trying to look at the idea that maybe this horrible thing that was nuclear power could become something hopeful. Could become something that can be used for peace and for good. And so, you know, in Tetsuo and Atom there is suffering, there is like oppression, but Atom is like an optimistic, upbeat robot boy who is always, you know, fighting the good fight to like defend good people and even offer kindness to his enemies. So that was like Tezuka trying to see that positive side of technology and of nuclear power. And then there's Godzilla. Which was like, hey, isn't it like really dreadful what we're kind of doing to the planet with these nuclear weapons? Wouldn't the planet kind of get angry and fight the heck back? And that's what Godzilla is. It's an ancient dinosaur that gets awakened and superpowered by nuclear tests and rampages through Tokyo. It was directed by Ishiro Honda, but very importantly, with effects by Eiji Tsuburaya. Now, Gojira was a spectacular film that basically, while Atom was popularized in manga and later in the 60s anime, Gojira popularized the genre that we now call tokusatsu. The word tokusatsu literally means special effects in Japanese and covers a wide range of films and TV shows. But Gojira was kind of like the urtext of them all. And obviously the Godzilla film series is still going to this day. And so we have like the duality of technology and the duality of science in these two productions that were super influential, came out the same year, how science can be used for both good and evil. Just like, I have the list of my slides over here, sorry. Alright. So, and that leads us to Tetsujin Nichu Hachiko, Tetsujin 28. Tetsujin means Iron Man, and I know what you're thinking, and yes, Marvel's Iron Man came out 7 years later, roughly. It definitely came out later. I can't remember what year Iron Man came out, I don't care. I'm sorry. But, so if anything, Stan Lee took some notes. But, so Tetsujin 28 is the first modern mecha, came out in a manga by Mitsuteru Yokoyama, who would also innovate in this field quite a bit. And he got an anime in 1963, the first mega anime. And Tetsujin tells the story of a boy called Shotaro, whose father was a scientist who created Tetsujin as an ultimate weapon to fight in the war, but it was not completed before the war was over. And so in the post-war era, Shotaro, who is a genius boy detective, because it's a manga, Shotaro uses Tetsujin to fight against evil and to protect the innocent. But here the theme of the duality of technology comes up again, because as the theme song of the 1963 anime would say, Tetsujin is not sentient. Tetsujin is not like Astro Boy, who is like a sentient being with a moral core. Tetsujin is a tool. Tetsujin has no morality. And as the song says he can be an ally of good or an emissary of the devil, depending on who holds remote control, because it's actually remote controlled by Shotaro with like this big box. So it often happens in the manga of Tetsujin that like criminals will steal Tetsujin and just like rampage through Tokyo with it. And so once more we have like this entire kind of dual aspect of what technology can offer, progress, protection, or horrific destruction. Then in the 60s nothing happened. Ultraman held a plane. So the 60s we got the Tetsujin anime adaptation, the first Mecha anime, and of course the anime of Astro Boy, Tetsuo Atom, which was a big hit. Sometimes incorrectly hailed as the first anime. I don't actually know what the first anime is, but... and in 1966, Eiji Tsuburaya, who did the suit effects for Godzilla, with the rise of television in Japanese households, he was like, I can do that on TV and make a bunch of money. And he did it. He made Ultraman, which is a show about a hero that transforms and becomes a giant and wrestles with kaijus, giant beasts like Godzilla. And that series is also still going to this day, and innovated in the field of what we now call the henshin hero, the transforming hero. So like Kamen Rider and stuff like that, really a lot of it owes a big debt to Ultraman. Ultraman would eventually be also influenced by Thunderbirds. We don't have time to go into that. They love Thunderbirds in Japan, man. They love it. So then we get to the 70s. If it seems like I'm speeding through, it's because the 80s are insane. And so I really need to get to the 80s before this panel is over, otherwise it's a failure. And I'll be beaten up in the parking lot by Hilton security. So the 70s is the dawn of what we now call the super robot. So the super robot is a robot that has, like, it's not just like Tetsujin, which is just like giant and strong. They actually have a myriad of weapons and powers, and they fight extremely strange villains, usually aliens. And they're basically like a kind of like superhero style, like very kind of pulpy superhero style. And the sort of the founder of this trend was Mazinger Z, that came out in 1972, created by Go Nagai. Mazinger Z was the first. So what happened was Go Nagai was stuck in traffic one time, and he saw a guy in a motorcycle like weave through the traffic and past him, and he was like. His first thought as a normal person was like, man, I should get a motorcycle. His second thought was like, right, what if there was a giant robot that had a ramp on its back, and I could just like ride a motorcycle up the ramp, plug it on the head, and then like walk over the traffic. The motorcycle bit got taken out, but that's essentially the point of Mazinger. It has like a little ship on the head, the hover pilder, as it's called. And it's basically the first piloted giant robot. You will sometimes see people say that a piloted giant robot is a mecha, and if a giant robot is not piloted, it's not called a mecha. This is a Western idea and a Western invention. In Japan, they're just called mecha. It's fine. Doesn't matter. Don't worry about it. Also importantly for us, because I know that you all like toys, we got the GA01 Mazinger Chogokin. You might have heard of Chogokin. Have you heard of Chogokin? Have you heard of Chogokin? Yeah. So Chogokin is a Japanese word that means super alloy, and it's actually not a word that was really used for anything before Mazinger, because it's actually a term from the universe of Mazinger. Chogokin means super alloy. So this was like the first Mazinger die-cast metal toy that it became huge, released since 1974 by Poppy, who is nowadays, I think it was a subsidiary of Bandai at that point. I'm not entirely sure. I'm not a toy person. What am I? Just feeling? I love that guy. I will never know half of what he knows about anything. So Mazinger innovated both as a story in a TV show that became massively successful, and in the toy aisle as well. And my phone has locked itself. This is great. This bodes really well. Right. Come on, we need to get to the 80s. The 1970s, after the explosion of super robots that came with Mazinger, there were several iterations as the genre grew. In 1972, the same year as Mazinger came out, we have Astro Ganger. I don't know, I found out about this one about my research. It's not very major except for the fact that he's sentient. He's the first sentient giant robot. Because Astro Boy was not a giant robot. Astro Boy was just like a person-sized robot. And Tetsujin and Messenger are not, we're not actually, sentient. Maybe you guys like combiners. Do we like combiners? Well, then you need to thank Ken Ishikawa and Go Nagai for creating Getter Robot, which was the first combining robot. The idea with Getter Robot is that these 3 ships would combine in different permutations to create Getter 1, 2, and 3, and then in a transformation that was completely impossible to replicate in toys at the time, and for years science has tried to replicate it and it's not really possible because it was not designed, because toys could not do that. It was 1974. And then in 1975, oh, who left this here? Someone's having a fancy drink. I'm just going to put this over here so we don't have any tremendous accidents. 1975, we have Brave Raideen, who is this fellow. That's another of the same line. That's from the same line as Messenger Stutter from the Chogokin line. And Brave Raideen the anime was directed by Yoshiyuki Tomino. Keep an eye on that guy. He's going to be important, like in about 5 minutes. But that is the first transforming robot toy made in Japan. The Chogokin Raideen transforms into a kind of like bird plane. I don't know how well you can see that. Shout out to Collection DX, whose photos I stole. I'm sorry, we're almost on the internet. Also, Raideen was like a sort of godlike being that was also kind of sentient. So again, innovating in terms of like being like a supernatural thing rather than invented by science. What have we got next? What was next? Oh, we're so close to the 80s, I can taste it. Sorry for speeding through these a bit. I'm going to try to make these slides available on my Twitter later. In the 70s, meanwhile, Japanese pop culture was growing. We had shoujo manga, that's manga aimed at women, and especially young women. It was evolving with the Year 24 group, which was a group of female manga artists who were creating manga with a lot of like LGBT and kind of feminist kind of themes. One of them was Moto Hagio. 1971, we got Kamen Rider, created by Shitaro Shinomori. Great guy. Love that guy. Takeshi Hongo. Love that guy. He's a bugman. He fights Nazis. What's not to love? But most importantly for the direction of mecha anime is that we started getting anime kind of started getting serious, and we started getting space operas. We had Space Battleship Yamato, which Leiji Matsumoto worked on, and then Leiji Matsumoto went on to create the Captain Harlock universe with the 1977 show Space Pirate Captain Harlock. And these were like romantic space operas about fighting evil with like inimitable style. And they were becoming really what people were seeking in like more kind of serious anime rather than anime that was just aimed at children. This is when anime started really diversifying age-wise. As the 70s were drawing to a close, there was an anime that would be very, very important in history that came out in 1979. That's right. The Rose of Versailles. I don't know what you were expecting. This was the most important anime of the year it came out. It was the most highly regarded. It had the best animation budget. It had character designs by Shingo Araki, who went on to do the character designs of the Saint Seiya anime. And I'm from South America, and I'm in my 30s, so I care about that, okay? Rose of Versailles, very good. It's a historical fiction about Marie Antoinette and her trans bodyguard, Oscar. It's tremendous. You should watch it. The manga's not as good, in my opinion. I don't know what to tell you. I just put it here as a fake out because we all know what's going to happen. We all know what's going to happen. 1979's most culturally significant anime for the modern age is, of course, Kidou Senshi Gundam, Mobile Suit Gundam, directed by Yoshiyuki Tomino, character design by Yoshikazu Yasuhiko, mechanical design by Kunio Okawara, who would later design the Star Saber toy, no problem. But anyways, Gundam changed things. Gundam changed the playing field because by the late 70s, super robots were kind of over. They were oversaturated, they were all over the toy aisle. Nobody saw anything worthwhile in making robot anime because they were like, it's just like a silly thing to sell to kids. And while there were some very good super robot anime that kept being made, it was really, Mobile Suit Gundam changed everything. Instead of being a story about am I like standing like, is this bad? I mean, like my distance with the mic, because it's a problem. Instead of being a story about like a super fancy robot with 1 million weapons and stuff like that, that fights horrific aliens, it's actually, while it keeps a lot of the same colorful aesthetics of the time, because we had the Zelda show in 1979, it is actually a very great story about war between humans in a kind of hard science fiction future. There are no aliens, there's no interplanetary travel. Overpopulation has forced humanity to live in orbiting gigantic space habitats while the elite stay on Earth. The furthest nation, the furthest space colony cluster from Earth declares independence, and a huge, horrific war takes place between the Earth Federation and the Principality of Xi'an. But it's an anime that has like a huge amount of like a moral grayness to it, because it's just the horrific actions of war. You see good and corrupt people on both sides. And the main characters are not just like the hot-blooded heroes of super robots that were just like, that had a heart of justice and would save the day. They are just like a bunch of traumatized teenagers that find themselves thrust into the middle of this war and are trying desperately to survive it. At the end of every episode of Mobile Suit Gundam, this is a tradition in anime, in the final next episode, Stinger, maybe someone will like say like a little quote. The quote that was said at the end of this children's anime was, "Who will survive?" And of course, like all revolutionary things, Mobile Suit Gundam failed and got cancelled. It got cancelled. But then something happened. See, they made a bunch of diecast toys for it that are now super rare, and they were kind of super roboty and had combinations. But the people that had watched Gundam couldn't really connect with them, because they didn't really reflect the sort of grounded setting in which the mecha were they're just mass-produced robots. They're just mass-produced vehicles of combat that needed to like reload their ammo and reload their energy, you know? And this is why they became known. The robots that came after Gundam in this new genre were called the real robots, because they were real short for realistic, not because they're more legitimate or anything. But Gundam would become very lasting, because in 1980 something would happen, which is the birth of Gunpla, the birth of Gundam model kits. A company called Bandai decided, instead of releasing toys, they released very, very cheap, like literally like £2 tiny model kits of the show, as if they were like scale models, as if they were like an airplane or another vehicle of war. The very, very first one was, of course, the protagonist RX-78-2 Federation Space Forces Close Combat Mobile Suit Gundam. And there were, of course, many others. Like as they started iterating, they made the Real Type series, which had like, all these like markings to make it look like really cool and kind of, you know, really kind of look like the tank model case that would be next to it. And this became a craze. Many people say that it wasn't that Gundam became a popular culture craze, it was Gunpla that became a pop culture craze. And so in reruns, Gundam found an audience, and so because of this and the huge success of the model kits, which were, many of them had like lore in the manuals that were expanding this world. And Gundam kind of happened at the right time, because of the growth of anime in the 70s that we covered. There was now a burgeoning, growing fan culture. Can you imagine being fans? Can you imagine fandom? And of course, the makers of Gundam decided to exploit this, because why not? And in 1981, they released the first of 3 compilation movies of the original series, which had some neo-animation in them, and they were released to theaters and they were huge hits. And they decided that because Gundam was so groundbreaking, they were going to market it as like, oh, this is the new century of anime, the new era of anime. And this is director Yoshiyuki Tomino, long before he became known as the Bald Wizard. Really very dapper there. And so at this event they were expecting like 1,000 people, and about, the newspapers reported 10,000, but there were actually more like 25,000 people at this event, which was the premiere. Yeah, the premiere of the 1981, the first Gundam movie. The cardboard cutout behind Tomino is actually as tall as the Gundam, it's 1-to-1 scale. And Tomino took the mic and basically said that that they were trying to like put some, shot some sense into the creators of anime, because young people clearly cared about the themes of Gundam, and that they should care about what is happening here today. and that they should kind of listen to these messages. Of course, this entire thing was like a very, very commercial kind of move, but more importantly, there were cosplayers there. Cosplay was being born. And you have here two cosplayers dressed as Shara Aznavour and Lala Sun, characters from the original Gundam. And these people are actually quite famous. That's voice actor Maria Kawamura and her future husband, Mamoru Nagano. He's going to become important later. And they also read the Declaration of the Anime New Century. Mamoru Nagano was, I think, fresh out of university. He came up through the nascent otaku fandom. And so, yeah, Gundam became a big deal. And it kind of changed the landscape of things with, by just creating a new context for robots where you could make something as detailed and as kind of more mature as the best Leiji Matsumoto anime. And in 1982, the further iteration that kind of cemented the look of the real robot, because Gundam looked a lot like super robots. The anime that really cemented the look was the Super Dimension Fortress Macross. That directed by Noboru Ishiguro, with Mecha designed by Shoji Kawamori. He designed I covered that already. Character designed by Haruko Mikimoto. You might know that. That's not Jetfire. I don't like that guy. I like this. This is the VF-1 Valkyrie. So, while Gundam innovated creating the genre, Macross really innovated in a visual way, in many ways, and by telling a very, very fascinating story of like interstellar war with a race of alien warriors who, when they discover human pop culture, they freak out because they've never heard a love song before. And this show tells of the tales of that war and the people caught in the middle, the pilots, the officers, and the pop idol, Lin Minmei, the first Japanese virtual idol. I'm going to go into that in a minute. And with her song, they could actually like really, really mess with the alien enemies, the Centrati, because they had never seen anything like it before, and they were so kind of culture shocked. And eventually many of them joined humanity and created a new civilization. In the many ways in which Macross innovated is like this, the focus of the story a lot of the time was a romantic triangle. And by having aspects of the story that appealed to the traditional demographics of, as they were understood at the time, of men and women, it became a cross-cultural phenomenon. The show got preemptively cancelled and was going to end at episode 26, and then it was doing so well in the ratings that they were like, no, you're going to do 13 more episodes. It's cool. And they did, and it's really good, more 13 episodes. But it also innovated in mecha design. The mecha in Macross, as you can see from like the VF-1 Valkyrie, they just looked like real things that you would see in the real world. Like the Gundam didn't really at the time, but like I remember when I was a kid, I could not tell the difference between the VF-1 Valkyrie and the F-14 Tomcat that it's based on, because it's, if you look at an F-14 Tomcat, shout me out if you went to G.I. Joe as a kid. The other way in which this kind of revolutionized Mecha was, of course, in toys. Now, yes, I'm going to talk about the Jetfire toy. So, that toy is very historically important. It was created by Takatoku Toys, and it was pretty much the first time that a toy of a robot could, without cheating, replicate exactly the transformation from the TV show, down to every single detail. And yeah, so Macross changed the way that mecha anime looked. And Macross will always be bigger than Robotech and will always be bigger than Jetfire. I don't have time to get into this too much. But Lin Minmei was the first virtual idol. Without Lin Minmei, we wouldn't have had Tokimeki Memorial Shiori Fujisaki. We would not have had Hatsune Miku, you may have heard of her. And then Shoji Kawamori's further idol experiment, AKB48, which had 48 idols. That's too many idols. And I'm into idols. That's too many. Obviously Love Live, which is another idol anime series. And those VTubers that your niece keeps telling you about. Or me, I will tell you about them. I'm really into VTubers. Love VTubers. Shoji Kawamori wants her money, by the way, so better pay up. the Starscream toy is there because he designed it, so, it's more important. We have bigger fish to fry. I'm not going to talk about Harmony Gold. I decided originally I was going to maybe mention the Harmony Gold robotic thing, and then I was like, not gonna. It's my panel, do what I want. Let's get some water. Alright. We're in the 80s, and we have time. So we're doing good time. So, of course, what happens when there's a new genre of anime? We get more innovation. So, we start getting a diversification of what mecha anime can be, not just in terms of real robots. So in 1980, directly after Mobile Suit Gundam, Yoshihiro Kitamino, who was not done influencing Japanese pop culture, created Space Runaway Down, which was a show that looked like a super robot show and ends up being an incredibly twisted and kind of heartbreakingly tragic tale of existential horror, for the kids. In 1983, Yoshihiro Kitamino, God, this guy is... Kitamino, come on. Give it a rest. He was literally directing a new anime every year in the 80s. It was kind of wild. Or Butler Dumbine was the first modern isekai. Do people know what an isekai is? So an isekai is an anime where a person from the real world gets transported to a fantasy world. That's the essential. Isekai means other world. So it's a very prevalent genre in modern anime, but back then it kind of really wasn't. And so this character, I think Shozama is his name, he's like a biker, he's like a Japanese biker, and he gets transported to the world of Byston Well, which is a high fantasy world of knights and kings and dragons, where everyone fights using giant robots called aura battlers, like sort of insectoid, kind of biomechanical robots. It was based on a series of novels, and Tomino did not want to put robots in it, because the novels didn't have the robots in it. And then they were like, no, you're Yoshihiro Kitamino, you're the director of Gundam, we have to have robots in there, sorry mate. It's his curse. And we also got Armor Trooper Photons, hugely important for also kind of providing us with more grounded real robots. In a real robot show, in a mecha anime, generally speaking, the protagonist will have the same mecha for half the show and then get an upgrade halfway through. I once saw a count of how many mecha the protagonist of Armor Trooper Photons, Chihiro Kyuubi, goes through. I think it's something like 50, because these things are death traps. They're called Armor Troopers, and that's the scope dog. It's called scope dog. I didn't mean it. These things are death traps. They basically use them, and then the moment that someone's bearing down on you, you gotta eject, you gotta leave it. They're not very big. They're about as tall as this construction behind me. And also, if this looks vaguely familiar, yes, Sega intentionally co-matched this with the final boss of Sonic 2, which is literally a scope dog with a Robotnik face. And that is the reason why they can never bring back the egg robot from Sonic 2 with the exact same sprite, because nowadays you can't really get away with that. So yeah. And it was and Photons was a very quick vision of the future. This panel is a bit all ages, so I don't want to talk necessarily about what happens in it too much. In the first episode already, the main character gets tortured, so it's pretty grim. It's a grim tale of the space nations fighting for hundreds of years. While all of this was going on, Tokusatsu, the Japanese superheroes were still going on. Kamen Rider was a bit in decline. And the company that made Kamen Rider decided they needed a replacement, so they made a series called The Metal Heroes, which had costumes that were kind of more. They were following the more realistic, detailed, mechanical stuff that was happening with real robots, all these cool, intricate designs. And the first of those Metal Hero series was, of course, Space Sheriff Gavin. Umar helped me put these slides together. That's not Space Sheriff Gavin. That's Gavin Spencer from Force Reviews Done Quick on YouTube, who better hit 10,000 subscribers before this panel is over. I'm not sure. Get him out of here. I don't want to see his face. I already live in Scotland. God, no, Space Sheriff Gavin. That guy. And Space Sheriff Sheriff and Scheider. I'm cheating here because I did this in a rush. This is actually from a very recent Stoker movie. But yeah, as you can see, like there's like, you know, the attempt to do like more mechanical detail in this. I only put this here because I really wanted to do the Gavin joke. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. I just thought it was really funny. I was cackling to myself before I as I usually do. I'm glad we got to this joke. Pun can end now. Anyways, in the 80s, a little thing happened. That's right, you can say it with me. Exactly. I've already listed a lot of these, but oh yeah, I forgot Junichi Akutsu, who worked on Gundam Seed, did Beast Machines toys and Fire Convoy toy design. This is just like a bunch of people that were intricately involved with Mecha anime and were involved in Transformers. Takashi Kunihiro, who designed a lot of Transformers toys. Akira Amemiya, director of 2018's Best Anime, SSS Gridman, did a bunch of illustrations and kit design for Transformers. We don't have time to get into Transformers. I don't care about Transformers, personally. That the guy sort of made that Transformer. But this is kind of like also taking place. And also, this is what I should point out. Because the VF1 Valkyrie from Macros was so popular, it really, well, transforming robots existed already, it really kind of launched the concept to the stratosphere, which resulted in this. It resulted in the next Gundam show inexplicably having a lot of transforming robots. It didn't make sense in Gundam. But anyways, we can move on from Transformers. I don't care about Transformers. That's a joke, by the way. I'm wearing a Transformers t-shirt at a Transformers convention. I paid to be here. I came from Scotland, come on. Give me some hacking credit. So next up, 1986, we get a manga. You guys, if you're you know, people in the anime rabbit hole like I am, you might have heard of New Type magazine. That's an anime magazine that started in the 80s. And there was this guy, Mamoru Nagano, who was, you know, do you remember the cosplayer? So he ended up working at Sunrise, the studio that made Gundam, and Dunbine, and Votons, and Ideon. That almost every major mecha anime of the 80s. And he ended up working there. He worked in an anime called Heavy Metal Little Guy, directed by Yoshiyuki Tomino. And he had a bunch of interesting ideas for it that he ended up putting like in a source book that they're like his headcanon essentially in an official book. And the editor of the up and coming New Type magazine was like, hey, do you want to draw manga for the magazine because your art is really good and interesting. So Mamoru Nagano, who had trained as a fashion designer, started this manga. It's still going to this day, the 5-star stories. It's a weird, the way I describe it to people is like, imagine if a sci-fi anthology series was kind of 10 times more ridiculously ambitious than the Silmarillion, and also a kind of prog rock riff. That's kind of what it is. This is literally the same robot. This is all the same robot. In the 80s, in the 90s and 2000s, and now. Because he keeps rebooting and reimagining this world, this strange world of, you know, interplanetary war and sorcerers and gods, and these things require 2 pilots. One of them has to be like a genetically engineered super soldier, and the other one has to be an android. Some of them can move at the speed of light and teleport. Some of them become gods in other universes. It's weird. It's really good. You should read it. So this is the Let Mirage, if you're wondering. And when 5-star Stories was recently kind of like, there was like a big retcon, it became, that's right, the Zarathustra Afterbringer. That's true, that's the thing. It was called the Let Mirage, now it's called the Zarathustra Afterbringer. That's okay, that's normal, Mamoru. Right, what's next? Where are we next? Give me a moment. I need to find myself, just in general, in life. We got about 10-15 minutes to get through. So let's get to it. I want to try to get to Evangelion. The late 80s, the OVA boom. See, in the late 80s, anime went bonkers. There is a reason why the Transformers 1986 movie is so well animated. Japan was experiencing what is now known as the bubble economy, where like there was just like so much money in the economy. There was so much just like economic success. And they were throwing it at the nascent anime industry. At the time, anime was not very corporatized, so this was literally like a bunch of guys that had grown up as anime fans and became really skilled animators, and then they would just spend like literally their entire life animating stuff because they loved doing it so much and they got a lot of money to do it. And so we have like incredibly detailed animation like we had in Aim for the Top Gunbuster, directed by Hideaki Anno. Pay attention to this guy, it's going to be important. And this was the breakout hit of Studio Gainax, also going to be important. It was like a tale that combined really interesting Western sci-fi concepts with super robots and real robots. It's great. It's like a 6-episode OVA. Sorry, OVA stands for Original Video Animation. It was like animation straight to video. You have Dragon's Heaven, which is less culturally significant, but it kind of shows the experimentation that's happening at the time. It was directed by Makoto Kobayashi, who was a mecha designer in Zeta Gundam. And it's just this very strange 40-minute film that has like, if you can see this art style, is really inspired by like European like stuff like Mobius and stuff like the comic artist Mobius and stuff like that. And it was just a very strange tale of sentient robots. Who cares about sentient robots, right? That's a joke. It's really good. You should watch it. It's kind of weird. It's called Dragon's Heaven. And then the 90s happened and the bubble bursts. Suddenly, there is no money. And do you know what's really expensive to animate by hand at a time when CGI doesn't, practically exist in the medium? Do you know what's really hard to animate? Robots are very expensive to animate because the moment that a robot is off-model, it looks really weird, much more than like a character. And we have, at the same time, we have the rise of like shonen and shoujo, manga and anime. We have the rise of Dragon Ball. We have the rise of Sailor Moon. Yeah, and Magic Knight Rare, that's actually my favorite. Yeah, Magic Knight Rare, we don't have time to talk about Clamp, I'm sorry. I'm a big fan of Clamp, we don't have the time to talk about it. But it's both a Magical Girl series and a Mecha series because Clamp were shoujo manga creators that were just breaking into the mainstream, and the magazine that published Sailor Moon was like, hey, do you guys want to do like a Magical Girl to be a big hit? Because you guys are great, but you haven't had any big commercial hits. And Clamp didn't watch or read Magical Girl stuff because they were into tokusatsu and mecha, even though they were shoujo artists. So it's like, it's an isekai story that has giant robots in another world, and it's great. Let me see what else we got. Well, and that brings us to the mid-90s, and that brings us, of course, to Neon Genesis Evangelion, the show that changed anime. By Studio Gainax, directed by Hideaki Anno, music by Shiro Sakisu, character designs by Yoshiyuki Sadamoto. Evangelion changed anime in so many ways that this would be a whole other panel, but we only have about 12 more minutes. So, basically heavily inspired by Hideaki Anno's love of Ultraman, and following a lot of like the core concepts of what an Ultraman narrative is. Eventually, Evangelion takes a cue from a lot of like more existential robot anime from the 80s, like Ideon or the darkest bits of the original Gundam, and becomes a tale that is about like trauma, depersonalization, existential depression of its cast. It's a fascinating anime. I can't really. I need to hold my interest. We have stuff to get through, but the very, very important thing, one very, very important thing that Evangelion did, one of many, was that it expanded interest in what was called late night anime that was like way past the watershed, like midnight, and aimed at a more kind of mature and adult audience, and it inspired anime to get weird because a lot of Hideaki Anno's inspirations were like the French New Wave and Western sci-fi novels and The Prisoner and stuff. So Evangelion is good. It's really good. The content warning for a million things. Don't watch it if you're having a depressive episode. After did that work? Okay, wait. So then, after Evangelion aired in 1995, in the late 90s, Mecha kept like kind of expanding. This is just stuff that Sunrise is doing, the creators of Gundam. We have Escaflowne, another isekai with like shoujo elements, directed by Shoji Kawamori. I told you that it was important. We have the King of Braves, Gal Gaigar. Now, I haven't touched on the Brave series, but it was basically essentially Takara going like, hey, people are still, we can still sell Transformers toys, we can just like rebrand them, we can do our own Transformers. And that was the end of it. King of Braves, Gal Gaigar. Don't have time to go into Braves, I'm sorry. It's a very long thing. 1999, for the 20th anniversary, Yoshiyuki Tomino returns to direct Gundam with Turn A Gundam. He directed many other shows. Turn A Gundam is, in my opinion, a masterpiece. It's a very weird tale of a future where humanity has progressed to early World War I levels of technology, and they get invaded by a space colony that has retained all this super advanced technology of thousands of years into the future. It has character designs by Akira Yasuda from Darkstalkers and Street Fighter, mecha designs by several mecha designers, but most especially Sid Mead, you know, the Tron and Blade Runner guy. He designed the main Gundam for that. Music was by Yoko Kanno, who had also done music for Escaflowne and a bunch of other things, and was becoming like the great anime composer for prestige anime. Turning Anime is incredible. It's really good. You should watch it. It kind of deconstructed Gundam because it's a show about avoiding a war rather than fighting one. In the 2000s, we started getting the nostalgic room, right? So we have nostalgic revisitings. Why did I write something so awkward to say? In 2004, TF.Spacestation-Online got a remake called TF.Spacestation-Online. It's a remake of 2016, so it's called. And in this reimagining by G Gundam's director Yasuhiro Nagawa, it's the same story with that kind of like retro kind of styling, but it really tries to analyze the role of Japan in World War II, and it gets pretty heavy. This is an old ages panel. I can't really describe a lot of what happens in it, but there's a lot of horrific things that happen in it, and trying to find in that post-war Japan, like trying to build a future when so many horrible things have happened and keep happening as a consequence of that war in the show. It's really, really good. 2006, Code Geass, Real Robots for a New Generation. Clamp did the character designs. In 2007, Technicolor Gurren Lagann really brought super robots to the fore, and in this complete extreme way that Gainax were famous for. And Gainax entered a period of decline after it, and most of the people that were involved in Gurren Lagann ended up founding Studio Trigger and a couple of other anime studios. So as you see, like, nostalgia was also happening in this field. Oh, how are we doing? Oh, I can't see. How are we doing? We're doing okay? We're doing 5 minutes? God, okay, cool. Gundam and Macross continued being good. They kept making shows. Gundam Low is really good. Geopolitics of the present day. Macross and CGS is a bit ropey, but the writing and music are electric. So yeah, sometimes Gundam were good, Gundam and Macross were good. Sometimes they really weren't. Like Gundam definitely Macross Delta, which, wow, they can make a Macross with bad writing, but at least the music owns. Gunpla goes global and Gundam goes mecha, which shows about kids building model kits and fighting with them. You know, this one is a bit of an isekai kind of MMO tropes. That one is basically build fight is kind of like a shonen tournament anime. I'm really blasting through these because of the running out of time. Oh, I'm almost done actually. That's pretty good. Studio Trigger, who I just mentioned, ex-Gainax, they innovated and iterated. They created Promare, incredibly stylish mecha anime, kind of gay, pretty good. 2018, SSSS Gridman, which is literally the best Transformers anime ever made. And I could explain that to you at the bar. It's very long, but essentially all of the main cast of Gridman correspond to Transformers characters, and that's on purpose. Mainly Shattered Glass. It made me care about Shattered Glass. I've never cared about Shattered Glass before. It's really good. It basically is a continuation of the 90s Tokusatsu show SSSS Gridman, which was created by the same people that make Ultraman, and it basically combines aspects of Ultraman, Evangelion, and Transformers into a story that still feels completely fresh and original, and you should watch it. And okay, and now just for the end, I have recommendations and thank yous because like we're running out of time, so I'm really sorry about that. So you're asking now, like, I want to watch some mecha anime. Where should I start? Right? You're asking that, right? Yeah. Okay, cool, good. What's these ones? Macross Plus, which is a movie. It's really good. It's from the early 90s, Yoko Kanno soundtrack. A bunch of these I've mentioned. I put Votoms twice. I just really like Votoms. Votoms is good. I'm sorry, I made these at 4 in the morning while watching a VTuber stream at the same time. Messengers and Infinity is a movie, so you can get like introduced to Messenger through that. These are all really good. And just watch Gridman. You'll thank me for it. No other. What? Oh, Dynasty comes after. Dynasty is the sequel. Yeah, Dynasty is pretty good. But it's a sequel to Gridman. And before we go, some thank yous. I want to thank the Naka Robots podcast, Incident List and All Ages panel. If you're Under 18, don't listen to that podcast, please. Real Big Boy Hours, all staff. People know what that means. I don't need to explain that. Billy Edwards and Alex. Well, Alex for getting in touch with Billy to get this panel done. Umar, my esteemed assistant. Thank you, Umar. And I think Umar has a shout out in the next slide. So this is Umar's cheeky shout out to this VTuber that we know. This is a VTuber, it's called Maracinco. Why am I pointing her out in the Mecha panel? She builds Gunpla on stream. You should watch her, Twitch.tv for also Maracinco. She's a VTuber, she's a singer. She streams for an anime actor, she's cute, funny, seems real nice, popular. She does toy reviews. Yeah, she talks a lot about Gunpla, Tokusatsu. You know, you should go there. She has a little duck. Look at that duck. Look at that duck. It's pretty good. But yeah, anyways. We got through all the slides. I can go home.